Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. My guest this time out is Jeffrey Martin, a pioneer in the field of 360-degree photography. Jeffrey, who's from the States, has been living here in Prague for 2.5 decades. He really does some jaw-dropping work, and his company, Mosaic, recently launched a 15 terapixel open-source dataset of high-resolution street view imagery of the city that he now calls home. But how is this incredibly detailed mapping of Prague carried out? And who are the main users already accessing the resource, which is free for non-commercial use? I spoke to Jeffrey Martin in a small park near his office in the Smíchov district for this edition of Prague Talk. My first question is a simple one in a way, but what brought you to Prague, Jeffrey?
I came to Prague in 1999. I was 23 years old, and I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do with my life. And I got a job teaching English. I took a course before I came to Prague to get certified as a teacher of English as a foreign language.
Were you already a photographer in those days?
Yes, I was. I've been an avid photographer since I was like 10 years old, and I've always been extremely enthusiastic about photography, and I discovered 360-degree photography in around 2003, and I've been quite obsessed about it since then.
Well, among the things you've done was an amazing image in 2011 of the crowd at the FA Cup final at Wembley in London. And yes, you're a kind of pioneer, I guess, of panoramic photography. What drew you to that particular field?
Well, I got my first digital camera in around 2002 maybe, and it had a very primitive panoramic photo function where you'd take a picture and it would superimpose the last picture on top of the next one. And it kind of immediately struck me as something fundamentally different about digital photography, that it's kind of fungible and you can, merge multiple photos into one photo, but that also that a 360-degree photo describes a single place on Earth and no other.
Did you start using readily available technology, or were you involved in the development of some of the gear that you use now, or have used over the years?
In the beginning, I just used off-the-shelf cameras and software, although in the very beginning, to create a 360-degree photo required using some fairly complicated and hard-to-use software, and so I had to search for help on the internet in various web forums to figure it out. And so there were a lot of people helping each other figure out how to do it, and a lot of those people that I met back then in around 2005 are still very good friends today, actually.
Were you always technically minded, for example, as a kid?
Not really. I guess I've always kind of liked tinkering a little bit, but I wasn't one of those people who would, take stuff apart and put it back together. Absolutely not. I wasn't at that level of proficiency. I think I could take stuff apart, but I couldn't put it back together again. I remember once I took apart my dad's watch, and he was extremely angry because nobody could put it back together again.
I first, really noticed your work when you were doing these 360 cities, photos of cities. Was 360 Cities, which was like an online site, I guess, was that something you developed or you created?
Yes, I founded that it grew out of a project called Prague360.com, which I started in 2005, 2006, and it grew into sort of a global platform, and it's still going today. It's 360cities.net. It's a publishing and licensing platform for 360-degree photos. It's kind of a curated platform for kind of high-quality, artistic 360-degree photos. So yeah, I started that.
How does that work in terms of a business?
So photographers can publish their images on it for free, and then they can be licensed to advertising companies, editorial companies, educational companies, and that money is shared with the photographers.
And say when you're talking about these panoramic shots or these 360 photos, how has the technology developed over the years? I mean, how would one taken today compared to one from 15 years ago?
So 15 years ago, you needed to use a digital SLR with a fisheye lens, and you would have some mechanical rotator that would rotate the camera around a specific axis so that there's no parallax from one image to the next, and you would use some software on your PC to stitch them together. And these days, there's multiple cameras you can buy off the shelf, and you just push a single button. It has 2 lenses, and it stitches them together by itself on the device, and you can see it on your phone. Also, on the phone itself, you can just get an app that will stitch images together, so you can just take a bunch of pictures with your phone and stitch them together automatically on the phone itself. You can still do it the original way, and it will still give you a level of quality that is much higher than these other off-the-shelf solutions, but you can do it today without any technical proficiency whatsoever.
Recently, your company Mosaic launched a 15 terapixel free open source data set of high-resolution street view imagery of Prague. What is the background to this big project?
My company Mosaic, we make primarily 360-degree camera hardware for geospatial applications. So if you think of the Google cars that have the camera on top of the car, so we make cameras like that one, and we sell them to a lot of different customers all over the world. We've shipped these cameras to over 40 countries worldwide, and typically they're used by companies to do some kind of inspection of the infrastructure, of the roads, of the electrical infrastructure, and things like that. Our customers do this for municipalities or departments of transportation or other organizations like that. Basically, everything that we build, all of the roads and everything around, all of the electrical lines and poles and everything, we need to obviously maintain it, and we don't want it to fall apart. We want to be able to fix it before it falls apart, before it breaks. So the old way to do it is you send some people out with a clipboard, and they check that everything's okay, and they make notes. And the newer way to do it is you have a driver, you have a car, and you create imagery of everything, and you can have somebody check it in the office. And this is a lot cheaper, a lot more efficient. This hardware is what we make. So obviously we make this stuff, and we have to test it extensively, which requires us to drive around. And there's only so many times you can drive around the same block before you go completely crazy. So it makes more sense for us to actually map the whole city. So at a certain point, we said to ourselves, okay, well, now we have hundreds of kilometers of data. It's extremely accurate. It's extremely high quality. The GPS accuracy is within a couple of centimeters. The imagery is extremely high resolution. Why don't we do something useful with it? Why don't we make it available for people who want to do something with it?
This is for non-commercial usage. It's free.
Yeah. So we thought, okay, there are researchers who like to have data sets available for research. There's a lot of interesting creative things that could be done with this data. We don't even know what. And there are, I think, a lot of things that people early in their careers, or academic people, a lot of people owe a lot to the availability of certain types of either open source software or free open source data sets. And I think a lot of good can come back. Of course, part of it is a marketing activity. It gets our name out, but a lot of good can result from allowing people to have access to a huge, interesting, accurate, detailed data set in this age of AI and computer vision research and everything else.
So far, who has been making use of this resource?
So, as I said, we don't actually know initially what people might like to do with it. So when we first announced it, we got a lot of interesting inquiries. So, of course, there are like 3D artists who would like to try to make 3D models with the data, where they don't actually have access to the images that they would like to in order to try to do it. There are AI researchers who would like to figure out how to detect certain objects, but then we had one person from a neurology department at Harvard studying like the saccadic eye movements, like the way that your eyes sort of twitch when they move. So they want to study that, and for that they need lots of 360-degree photos. So that's one example of some completely out there use case that we didn't imagine before. But we've gotten so far like many hundreds of people sign up for this all over the world, and I think it's mainly for things relating to computer vision.
To go back to the actual production of this street view imagery, your car, how does it work in terms of how you capture the images, how you save them when you're on the move, that kind of thing?
So we have the camera. It's about the size of your head, maybe, and it's on sort of a tripod on the roof of the car, and there are a few other sensors. There's some very large GPS antennas. There might be like a little laser scanner or something like that, and there's a few wires going into the car. So yes, it really does not look like a typical car, and it does sometimes draw a lot of attention. People automatically assume that we're Google and that we're making this Google Street View, which we're not, but people think we are. So in this country, and I've heard it kind of varies from country to country, but here people kind of love Google Maps and Google Street View, and they're generally very thrilled with the idea that they're going to be there. So usually they wave, and they're quite cheerful to see us.
So no one's giving you the finger or anything like that?
No, not so much. We've heard from people in other countries that people are quite guarded about their privacy, and they get more kind of angry people, like in Denmark, for example. But here people seem to be very enthusiastic, especially when there's a group of school kids. They kind of erupt in enthusiasm, and it's pretty funny.
And how does your product compare to Google Street View, which everybody listening to this or reading this will know?
It's very similar. So Google typically makes their own hardware for Google Street View, although they do in certain cases source third-party cameras for data collections in countries where they are not legally permitted to do their own first-party data collection, such as India. But in general, the basic hardware is very similar. There's a 360-degree camera, there's a high-end positioning system involving a GPS and motion sensors, and there might be a LiDAR or laser scanner there. So in general, it's very similar.
How much of Prague have you mapped in this way, and how long did it take you roughly?
So we've mapped, I think, about 80 or 90% of the city center, depending on how you define the city center. But like if you imagine the map that tourists get of Prague, so just the immediate kind of Prague 1 and, a little bit of Letna, Prague 6, 7, and Vinohrady and so on. So we've mapped about 80% of that, and that took a few weeks, I would say. About maybe 60 hours of actual driving time.
The press material for the project says that you took 1 million plus images per meter. How is it even possible to take 1 million images in 1 meter?
I think that might have been not phrased correctly. The total data set is, I think, 1.3 million images. There is one set of images every meter. So when the car moved 1 meter, it made one set of images. One set of images is a total of 72 megapixels.
Do you have to drive very slowly?
No, we can drive at normal speed limits. So where the speed limit is 50, we might drive around 50 in a normal kind of dense urban environment like where we are now near Andiel. We'll drive 20 or 30 kilometers an hour with the rest of the cars.
Are there any rights issues or privacy issues when you're doing this kind of work?
Yes, there are laws that we have to obey. There's the GDPR laws. So this type of data needs to be anonymized before it is published. And this is one of the reasons why there was quite a significant delay between when we announced this and when we made the data available, because we had to blur all of the faces and license plates from every picture. So from a million pictures, we had to run a bunch of analysis on them to identify every face and license plate and to obscure it in order to comply with GDPR laws. So even though we are driving around all the time, capturing all of these data and all of these pictures, whatever we publish is complying with the relevant GDPR laws.
Have similar projects been carried out in other European cities or elsewhere in the world?
By us, not yet. We have a lot of customers who have. So we have one customer in Denmark who maps the entire nation of Denmark every 2 years, and they capture something like 98% of the publicly accessible roads in Denmark, which is significantly more than what Google does. And they license this data to many, many different customers, including government customers and commercial customers.
Do you have any other notable projects on the go, Jeffrey?
We are adding laser scanners or LiDAR to our products. So in addition to capturing pictures, we're capturing 3D laser points as well, which makes it much easier to create a 3D model of everything that we're scanning. Although that's possible to do doing photos only, it's much easier to do with lasers. So that's what we're testing now. And of course, we're always working on new products, making our devices, higher resolution and better and easier to use and so on.
And how is AI affecting your industry?
So generally, people are using AI to kind of automate the detection of certain types of things. So we have a lot of customers that need to, for example, detect, or they need to locate every electrical pole in a region. And it might be a big region. It might be the entire state of California, for example, or an entire municipality. And if you use AI, you can train an AI to learn what is an electrical pole, either from the laser point cloud data or from images, and then you can automatically find all of the electrical poles in your data set and then geolocate them and plot them on a map without any human input. And in general, this kind of stuff, it works really well for certain types of objects like street signs or faces and license plates or electrical poles. It works less well for things like garbage cans, which, if you think of a garbage can, it's easy for a human to understand what a garbage can is, but it is extremely difficult to teach a computer what is and is not a garbage can, because they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, in fact, and there's no strict shape of what a garbage can is. So some things AI can do easily and some things it can't.
Do you feel any threat from AI?
No, I think there's still a lot of automation that needs to be done in this industry, and actually we're still talking to people who are doing things the old-fashioned way by sending people out with clipboards, and they haven't even moved into the 21st century. So I think AI is helping to automate some of the computer vision tasks that are still quite labor-intensive, but these jobs are typically done by like teams of people in countries such as India. So those companies might be threatened somewhat by AI, but in the end I think they will just end up being more efficient at a certain thing and they'll be able to do something else instead.
And personally, are you an AI enthusiast, or are you like me, just scared, deeply scared?
I think the threat is always about what bad people will do with it, not with the technology itself. I think it's a tool like any other tool, and I think that there will be amazing things that will be done with it. I think we will be able to cure diseases and understand the human brain, and I think we'll be able to understand a lot of stuff that we were not able to understand before. But there will be bad people who will try to do bad things, as always.
To bring this conversation kind of back around to the beginning, you said you moved here in 1999, so you've been here 25 years. What do you think Prague has given you in that period?
Well, Prague has changed a lot, as have I. I was a young adult when I came, and now I'm a middle-aged guy with 3 kids, with 3 teenagers, who are almost as old as I was when I came. Prague is a very kind city. I think in general, the more I travel and see places, even when I go to places that I really enjoy, I'm always really happy to come back to Prague because it's a really good place and it's a great place to live. When I go to places like London, for example, I can't imagine living in such a huge, busy place where everyone looks so stressed out. Prague it's just sort of the right mix of a proper city and getting things done and somewhere where it's possible to enjoy your life.
And given everything that's happening now in America, does that make you even gladder to not be living in the States anymore?
Yeah, I think the thing about the States that gives me the most pause about wanting to live there again is the healthcare. One of the most dystopian things I've seen is people like crowdfunding their life-threatening healthcare. This is so scary to me, and living in a place where that's just a non-issue gives me a lot of peace of mind. And having had 3 kids, we have had our absolute, fair share of visits to the hospital and visits to doctors, and it's always been great. So, yeah, given everything else that's happening now in the States, yes, this seems like a place of relative peace and calm, and hope it stays that way.
Many thanks indeed to Jeffrey Martin, whose work is really well worth checking out online, for speaking to me for this edition of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. If you're new to the pod, this one has been going for a few years now, and you can find well over 100 earlier conversations in the series wherever you get podcasts. For now, that's all from me, Ian Willoughby. Thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.